Hi everyone, and welcome to my new YouTube video. Today my subject is going to be one of my favorites, which is a combination of some different Viking symbols. So you can see what I'm doing here is just laying out the initial graphite framework, and sometimes I debate on including that because I think, oh, it might be not so dramatic, the lines aren't so dark, but it is a really important part of the drawing process, the precision of measuring out all these different elements and sort of testing the composition. If you look, you can see that I've created a lot of paper stencils, or at least I do throughout this process. So, and I will continue to use that original stencil to cut out other internal shapes to create a more elaborate design. So I have the Thor's hammer as the main central symbol, and then within that I have, and I may be pronouncing this wrong, it's called the Vegvisir. It's the Viking compass, which is said to help even the most lost traveler find his way. So I think that's a really cool element. I love those types of sacred symbols, runes, talismans that are supposedly imbued with this magical power. And that makes me think a lot about symbols and the power that we give to them. It's kind of a magical process to have a symbol take on that kind of communal meaning. And the symbols that we have even now that are evolving in our contemporary society, something as simple as what we used to call the pound sign, which is now our hashtag, which is now an incredible, powerful beginning to different movements, ideas. It's a way to connect with people. It's a way to stand for something, and it has a lot of power. So that's a contemporary one for us, and maybe 100 years down the road, people will be talking about how that evolved and what symbols ended up replacing it, or what their power symbols are in that time. So that's something I think about a lot when I'm working on these kinds of pieces. The shape that you see on the top, that sort of crescent moon shape, is another symbol that I discovered was used for Viking jewelry. And I really liked that, and I thought that would make kind of a nice cap for this particular composition. So what I'm working on now is really just those elaborate little details that make the piece come alive. And I wasn't trying to be faithful to any kind of Celtic knotwork or a traditional design. I just wanted to use those base shapes and then just have my own reaction to it to make it authentic, which is what I think that we all strive to do. So what I was saying before about how I think about these symbols, and when I work on them, I also think about them in context, in terms of history, and I can't help but imagining what life might be like. You know, what if you were a woman back in the Viking era? Imagine what the hygiene situation might be like, the sort of standards, the elements that we're used to now. What would it be like if we just sort of shuttled back in time and found ourselves, even like 200 years ago, things would be a lot stinkier and, you know, just totally different. We just wouldn't have any of those amenities that we just take for granted all the time. And it helps me to kind of put myself in that place and imagine, okay, this could be potentially a pretty terrifying experience. What if I just lived in that time and got a cold or some kind of an infection, and the likelihood of my dying would be pretty high because we just didn't know much. And again, putting ourselves in our current context, yes, we've come so far, and yet, you know, who's to say what will be occurring, you know, in the next 100 years, and they might look back like, oh my gosh, can you imagine living like those people did, or wearing those kinds of clothes? What were they thinking? So, oh my gosh, they had so much hair. Will they will we evolve to that state where we completely change in this physiological way? And so that's where my mind kind of wanders. And I think that as you draw, you end up allowing yourself to just meander through those kinds of thoughts, and I think it adds a lot to the process. I'll still look at older pieces that I have and remember the music I was listening to, or how I was feeling, or something I was thinking about, and it's almost like the art process is a way of creating a chronicle of my life, like looking back at something I did when I was 20 years old and subletting an apartment with 3 strangers and taking classes, and I was totally overworked. And when I'll look at that piece, I'll remember what it felt like listening to the White Album at midnight while working on this drawing that I was totally into, and just enjoying that feeling and allowing myself to be in that state again. I think that we sometimes mistake our memories for this, just like this is like a state of being, like this happiness is just a feeling, like a concept of the time. It's not necessarily what was occurring at the time. It's just this internal state that we can find again if we're given the right set of circumstances. So back to this piece, one thing that I really wanted to add was a sort of smoky look, sort of like it was erupting. It was just sort of this full of this this contained power, and so I wanted to create this smoke bursting out of the sides, but I wanted to give it sort of a cold Nordic look, and I went over to my alcohol markers and used some warm grays and just kind of mixed up that sort of soft look to contrast the harshness of the micron pens. If you like the image, please see the description below for a link to my Etsy shop. It is available as a print. And if you like the video, please subscribe. I'd love to see you again. Give it a thumbs up. And I hope you got a little inspired. See you next time.